ladies and gentlemen, it's not often that one can introduce a real hero, and David Friedman is a fellow that I've known for a while in a different sort of context. See, he hired my college roommate back in 1997. And so I got to know David, occasionally running into him. I remember once we had, I think it was a Sukkot meal, and he was telling us how he helped Ivanka Trump bake her matzo balls or knedlach, something. He was like going on and on about knedlach. And, I knew David was not just a good lawyer, but David was a great lawyer. And as a bankruptcy attorney, you have experience with restructuring. And of course, that's what the president wanted, was to restructure the Middle East. And David didn't become just a great ambassador, he became the best ambassador. And Brian Hook told me just on Friday that David is the most effective of all the United States ambassadors, which is quite an accomplishment. And it's not just his restructuring ability, but the leadership qualities, which I think David got from his father, enabled him to do amazing things. So if it was just the embassy move, Dayenu. If it was just the Golan Heights, Dayenu. If it was just recognition of the settlements, Dayenu. But David's genius shows up in a way that many people probably don't realize when he closed the Jerusalem Consulate. You see, the Jerusalem Consulate was essentially the mouthpiece of the Palestinian Authority, which was manifesting all kinds of lies that were actually infiltrating into our very own State Department. Lies such as the Palestinian prisoners are paid, the terrorists are paid by the Palestinian Authority, and the Jerusalem Consulate proffered this idea that made it into our annual State Department reports, that these payments to terrorists are really just to reintegrate the Palestinian prisoners into society, and it's a good thing, and we have to keep paying the terrorists. Anyway, David really cut that out. And so, David really is a bona fide hero to me. I mean, what he has done is absolutely astounding. And I think that it's not just myself that recognizes it. I think that across Washington, across the Jewish community, across Israel, if Ron wasn't here, I would say maybe David could run for PM next time or this time. And I think he'd probably have a good chance, actually, if you think about it, David, if Tammy will let you. Anyway, I'd like to introduce to you my great hero, David Friedman, Ambassador David Friedman.
David is elected. Rather than give a speech, we're going to have a short conversation about the upcoming Trump peace plan and other things. But we want to give him his award, and then we are going to be joined by Aryeh Lightstone, Chief of Staff to Ambassador David Friedman at the Embassy in Jerusalem. Well, can I ask Chloe, are we going to give David his award? I mean, we could just give him, the main course, but I'd rather give him his award.
Have you cleared it with the government ethics?
We have not, and there's a giant diamond hidden right inside, but no one's going to see that.
That's not good. That's not good.
David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You've pulled off miracles. You moved the embassy. I was there. One of the most inspiring days of my life. You were instrumental. The president gave you most of the credit for his recognition of the Golan Heights. I was there for the president's speech in Las Vegas. This is the most pro-Israel president, most pro-Israel administration in American history. So now, with Ambassador Dermer's very close associate, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, seeming to have won a resounding victory yesterday, what happens now with the administration's peace plan?
Well, look, I think the most important point to make about the peace plan in the first instance, all the other proposals have been the United States seeking to tell Israel what's best for Israel. Highly presumptuous approach. And it never went anywhere because the reality is the United States, as great as we are, as powerful as we are, as many resources as we have, we don't know better than Israel what's best for Israel. And so we approached this plan with great humility and respect for the Israeli government, which has a stellar track record over 72 years in the toughest neighborhood of the world, of defending itself by itself. So the most important part of this plan, how it differs from others, is it was a collaborative effort with the Israeli government, in particular with the guy sitting at my table, with Ron Dermer. We worked on this for years. And the one thing that I think it's worth noting, maybe it's a minor point, maybe not, but in the White House, in this White House and prior White Houses, you work on anything as sensitive and important as Middle East peace, it's going to leak out. People are going to be talking about it years, right? Right, Judge Janine? You get leaks, right? People tell you stuff that off the record, so what's special about this? 3 years of work, not one leak. No one ever knew what it said, and it's because, my point is not to gloat about the absence of leaks, but to gloat about the collaborative effort between Jared Kushner, Jason Greenblatt, Avi Berkowitz, me, with Ron, with the Prime Minister. Now that it's out, we can talk about it. But at a time when we knew that leaks would damage the prospects dramatically, we all kept it to ourselves, which means everybody put the mission ahead of their personal interests, which is unheard of in Washington. And so that's something that I'm particularly proud of.
Now look, this is the most pro-Israel plan ever offered. It demands that the Palestinians dismantle the Hamas terror state in Gaza. It demands that they stop all incitement in schools and in their media. It demands that it proposes that Israel alone controls external security. But it does create a Palestinian state.
Right.
You and I have spoken about this a bit. Leading Jewish philanthropists like Simon Falek, sitting right in front of me, and others have paused, including me, that a Palestinian state will quickly devolve into what Gaza is today. So when Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005, it led to terror tunnels, it led to nonstop attacks, it led to 3 wars. How would this be different?
Well, I think you answered your own question, which is that whenever Israel withdraws, it creates a vacuum that's almost always filled by terrorists. That was true in Gaza, that was true in northern Sinai, that was true in Lebanon. What's different about this plan is that Israel's not withdrawing. In fact, Israel's, not only they're not withdrawing, they're expanding their security presence. Right now, there is no interior Israeli security presence in Gaza. There is no internal Israeli security presence in Area A. There's limited presence in Area B. So this plan, you said it's very pro-Israel, and as you explained why it's pro-Israel, I would challenge you on that, because why is it pro-Israel to demand that the Palestinians that they renounce terror, that they put down their arms, that they stop incitement, that they stop hatred, that they begin to treat their own people without the breathtaking disregard that they have for the human rights and religious freedom of their own people? That's not pro-Israel. I mean, that's just sort of common sense. I mean, who wants to make peace with a partner that has a track record that the Palestinians have today? So I challenge you on that as a pro-Israel point. That really is a pro-Palestinian point, because the Palestinian people who've been held hostage by this repressive regime for the past 50 plus years are now being offered a future that's devoid of all these abhorrent activities. But Israel will actually expand rather than contract its security presence.
But I could turn that around, David, and I could say what's best. Look, it's not for me to say what's best for the Israelis, aside from the fact that I have 2 kids who served in the IDF. Gives me a little bit of credibility. But it's not for me to say what's best for the Palestinians. But I will say, since you're speaking about what's best for the Palestinians, Israeli Arabs enjoy more freedoms than any Arabs anywhere in the Middle East. 15 Arab MKs were elected yesterday in the joint list. They don't have anything like that, any kind of representative democracy, the 22 Arab states that surround Israel. My fear actually is for the Palestinians. Let's say there's a Palestinian state, even with all of these safeguards. Mm-hmm. Who is going to protect Arab women when they have a boyfriend from being murdered in an honor killing? Who is going to protect a gay Palestinian from being killed with the kind of freedoms and protections they would have under Israel? How does this Palestinian state sovereignty, how is it good for the Palestinians?
Well, I use this phrase somewhat glibly, but what I say is we're not really creating a Palestinian state. We're creating a Canadian state, right? Until the Palestinians become Canadians, there's never going to be a state. I mean, that is the premise of this plan, that the Palestinians have to completely turn around 180 degrees. Now, if they have a system that penalizes different religions, doesn't permit the diversity of observance that if they continue to outlaw homosexuality, there's never going to be a Palestinian state, because those are the building blocks of this plan. If it doesn't happen, then 4 years from now, where will we be in 4 years? Israel will have, in relatively short order, Israel will have expanded its sovereignty to include all the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, and the territory that the Palestinians would have had they become Canadians, as a shorthand way of saying it, it'll go back to what it is today. And so it's a challenge to the Palestinians. Now, they say, why do we have to be democratic? Why do we have to have these freedoms? There are lots of other countries in the Middle East that don't have them. And our answer is because those countries exist, but you want to come into existence today. We're not putting our fingerprints on a terrorist state. We're not putting our fingerprints on an autocratic state or a state that doesn't have religious tolerance or tolerance of all other human rights. And so it's really designed as a fail-safe. It really can't happen. Now, and if it did happen, the Israeli military apparatus is there. It will always be there. They're not moving back, they're moving forward. So the incremental risk, if you will, to the Israelis is just non-existence. If anything, there's an incremental security advantage.
Well, let's turn to religion for a moment. My deep respect for my Muslim brothers and sisters largely emanates from how proudly religious they are. When I was at Oxford as the rabbi, I helped the Muslim students get kosher meat, which was halal meat, because they didn't have halal. Now, their presence is there's a much bigger Muslim student presence than Jewish student presence. But at the time, the grandson of the Saudi king was a regular. My friend Ron Dermer, the ambassador Ron, who was our student president, remembers his two closest friends were Muslim students at Oxford. And there was tremendous harmony between us, even as we disagreed vehemently over the Middle East. But there was a strong sense of religion among the Muslim students. Now, Muslims will come and say that certain lands are theirs by right, and that Jerusalem is the third holiest site in Islam. But for us, Jerusalem is the holiest site. I know that the plan does not divide Jerusalem.
No.
But 80 million born-again Christians, evangelicals, who are the president's political base, believe that God gave this land to the Jewish people as a birthright. Rashi famously says, the great biblical commentator, this is why God has the book of Genesis, in order to emphasize that I created the world, I dole out parcels of land to the nations as I see fit. He gave the Jews a tiny little piece of land, the size of my state of New Jersey. How do the Jews now give up 70% of the biblical lands of Judea and Samaria, where 80% of all biblical events take place, to a Palestinian state?
So I would look at it a little differently. Instead of focusing on what's being given up, look what's being gained, right? Let's just take some obvious places. Hebron, which Abraham purchased, and which Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Rebekah, Leah, and Sarah are buried, right? Right now, there's no recognized sovereignty by Israel over Hebron. Under this plan, there will be. Bethel, where, how many Bethels are there in America, right? All named after the place in Israel where Jacob had a dream of the ladder, angels ascending to the heaven, and descending, he receives the word of God. Shiloh, a place where the phallic family has contributed significantly. Where the Ark of the Covenant rested when it came across the Jordan River until the temple was built. Qasr al-Yahud, a place that has very little tourists. Qasr al-Yahud is Arabic, but it means the castle of the Jews. Right? It's where Joshua brought the Israelite nation across the Jordan River. It's where John the Baptist baptized Jesus. Now, all these places right now are almost completely inaccessible to most tourists. I mean, you can go there, but you need an armored car. You need guides. I mean, Israel took control over Jerusalem in 1967. There's 3 or 4 million people that visit Jerusalem of all faiths. It's a beautiful open city. These places are inaccessible. So under this plan, these places become part of Israel, just like Haifa, just like Tel Aviv, and the accessibility to those people who value biblical tourism is going to grow exponentially. As Jews, we tend to think about what are we giving up. Let's also think about what we're getting. I mean, we're getting all this. There's a lot in this. And by the way, at this point, there's no commitment to give anything away at all, because the only commitment to give things away is upon the Palestinians achieving certain milestones, which at this point they haven't achieved.
Okay, but my final question, that may be true, but a map is being created right now. People don't realize how historic this evening is, because a map is being created right now, and some of the most important players are here right now. Ron Dermer is one of the chiefs of the Israeli delegation. We all know about the Arab-Israeli conflict. It's gone on. The president calls this deal of the century. You have some of the biggest decision makers here. Ron Dermer is one of the chiefs of the Israeli delegation. You are with Jared Kushner heading and Avi Berkowitz heading the American delegation. But a map is being created, and whether or not the Palestinians accept it, those contours of the map will determine the future of Israel, because the world will say that a right-wing government under Prime Minister Netanyahu, who I want to say on the record, in my opinion, is by far the greatest Prime Minister Israel has ever produced. We have the great honor of knowing the Prime Minister personally. But that map will be the future of Israel, so regardless of whether they accept it or not, David, this 70% is lost.
No, it's not true. That's not true. What's happening, the map that's being created accomplishes two things. Number one, it creates the parameters for the expansion of Israel's borders, right, which would expand to 30% of Judea and Samaria. The other 70% is subject to a lot of conditions with regard to the Palestinians, which if they don't meet, that 70% is not lost. That 70% then becomes subject to further discussions. So there is nothing lost. There is nothing in this plan which cedes any territory to a Palestinian state unless and until the Palestinians achieve the hurdles, and only if they do so within 4 years.
So even the mapping commission, which is being created right now, it's malleable. Those contours, those borders can change if the terror infrastructure is not dismantled.
What we're mapping right now is the expansion of Israel's borders. That's all we're mapping. We're mapping the way in which Israel will expand its borders to include these communities that I just mentioned and many, many more, so that the 450,000 Jews that live in Judea and Samaria will become absorbed into contiguous Israeli territory, and they will no longer be in no man's land where where people consider them to be somewhat in a different society. They don't get title to land. I mean, these are people that go out and buying houses and they're borrowing money, but they can't get they can't get the kind of mortgages you can get inside of Israel because there's title issues, because nobody really knows whether they're staying or going. So what this map will do is it will relieve and alleviate forever the uncertainty of the 450,000 Jews that live in the biblical heartland of Israel.
Okay, just before we end, Aryeh Lightstone, also on the mapping commission, correct?
Correct.
Do you get to carve out like a little villa for me with a swimming pool?
We'll be taking orders after the...
Can I make one comment, Shmuley?
Please.
If possible. I think two things. Number one, it's not a pro-Israel plan. It's not a pro-Palestinian plan. It's a pro-American plan. And the ambassador's very first public speech in Israel, he made something exceedingly clear. Being pro-Israel is a quintessential American value. The realistic components of this plan is in America's interest. Any weakening of Israel is anti-American interest. This plan substantially strengthens the state of Israel, and by definition, therefore, strengthens the United States of America. In terms of putting together an opportunity for the Palestinians, your introduction is exactly what this plan is all about. This plan is the world turning off their telephones for 2 hours for the Palestinian people to see that they can be loved. Their parents, their leaderships, have abandoned them. They've been on their phones, on Twitter the whole time. This plan says, we're turning off the phone. You don't need to act this way. You can rise up and you can be Canada, as the ambassador so aptly put it. This plan is the opportunity for them to seize the values that you so clearly promote. We hope that they reach it. We're skeptical, but it's an opportunity for them to reach up and achieve those values and to become part of the community of nations.
Okay, well said. Thank you both. David, I want to just, because we have to keep the evening moving, I want you to know, as an American Jew, and I knew you before you were ambassador, you have exceeded all expectations. And you have become America's
Well, that could have been
greatest
because the
ambassador.
expectations were low, so that isn't necessarily, a good thing.
I'm really saying this for your wife, Tammy. Tammy and I grew up in Miami Beach. I knew her father extremely well. We prayed in the same synagogue. Her father kept the synagogue in Miami Beach running with my uncle many, many years when it was on life support. So to see what you and David are doing now in the America-Israel relationship and everything you do for the United States of America in the Holy Land, it's extraordinary. And I want you to know, David, that you're now a historic figure and you've earned that right because you're changing history. And Aryeh, thank you for everything you do in the embassy as well. You're a hero. You're a great son of the Jewish people. You're a great son of the American people. And God bless you, Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you.